What's up, you guys? Thank you for clicking on this video. So as you can tell by the title, I will be going in depth with some figure information that Evan over at Hasbro gave in this recent interview over at MCM London with TF Wiki Community. I'm going to be going over 3 bullet points, talking a bit more in depth than I originally did in my video covering all of the information about new figures in this interview, because there's so much information and there's just not enough time to cover it as in depth as I want to, because if I did that it would probably be an hour-long video, honestly, and who the hell has time to edit an hour-long video in like an hour or two? That's kind of crazy. But so without further ado, let's get right down to the first bullet point. So they said, I was witness to a surprising amount of talk about Brazilian MINIBOT redecos. Oh man, I after I did my initial video, cause I knew about the Brazilian G1 redecos and stuff like that. I watched like a TJ Omega information video on it a couple years ago, and I was doing research on TF Wiki about it a while back. But I kind of just forgot about certain things. But I did some image research after my last video talking about this. And I was like, man, there is some crazy, wacky repaints that they can make that would actually make for some fun releases, to be like, to point your finger at your phone and be like, there it is. There's the green version of Bumblebee from that one Brazilian redeco from 1985. Look at that, Hasbro's doing it. Stuff like that. That would be kind of funny to see. And, we've been seeing that the last few years with like the GoBot repaints and the E-Hobby and the Diaclone stuff. So I'm not surprised that they want to delve into some more obscure G1 repaints, to make some extra cheddar cheese off their new molds here the last couple years. Now, would I pick up any of these Brazil G1 repaints, especially from the MINIBOTS? Probably not. I have no attachment to those repaints. I didn't grow up in Brazil. I wasn't even alive in the 80s. So I just don't really care. And plus, they're like D-level Transformers stuff that is just not my thing. So yeah, I'm going to be sitting those releases out whenever they inevitably do release. And the second bullet point that I want to cover in this video is, not claiming to be above it, I personally relate a Slipstream should be a straight SS86 Seeker redeco, basically no new tooling except maybe the face suggestion. Evan was mildly taken aback but wasn't opposed. The team had already internally recognized the desire for Slipstream, wasn't satisfied by the Legacy United Deluxe Scale figure. So originally I thought this was like a good suggestion from TF Wiki Community, and don't get me wrong, it wouldn't be a terrible idea. I would actually like to see that, just judging by the images that we've gotten the last couple months over the 86 Seeker mold. It looks pretty good. It looks like it's going to be one of the best Voyager class releases from Hasbro in the 2020s, no doubt about it. But, thinking further about Slipstream as a character, the legacy of animated, her design, and where she originates from, and, where people want to see her from the most, it would just feel, again, like one of those G1-ified releases that honestly sucks. Somebody like me who grew up on animated, who loves it, it's one of my favorite pieces of Transformers media. I just don't want to see Slipstream get done like that again for like the 3rd time in the generations. We had that, I think it was that 2014 figure from Takara that was a repaint of IDW Windblade, which obviously wasn't the best idea. It wasn't terrible, it was pretty decent, but it wasn't the most ideal thing in the world. And then fast forward, like 8-9 years later, you get basically the same thing in Legacy United, which is like a massive head scratcher. I know it's kind of a reference to the figure and a reference to Cyberverse and that little feud or whatever, but I'm just getting sick of that. And now fast forward like a year or two later, Evan at Hasbro was saying they realized that maybe that wasn't the best decision in the world during Legacy United. But then, TF Wiki Community is recommending the Seeker repaint from the 86 mold. I mean, I wouldn't mind it. It would be a lot better than what we got in Legacy United and better than what we got with Takara in 2014. I would have to push back just a little bit on that. I don't think I think it would just be retreading the same old ground, and we wouldn't really be getting anywhere with a new Slipstream. Sure, it would be a bit better since it's on that new Seeker mold, which is like the greatest thing ever since sliced bread, but it wouldn't be accurate to Slipstream as a character. She needs something a bit more unique to her, a bit more feminine, to reference the animated design a bit further. And I'm somebody who doesn't really care about, feminine features on robots. I think that's frankly weird in a lot of examples. But when it comes to it being unique to the character, like Slipstream and Black Arachnia and so on, you really can't miss those traits. And you kind of would if you just did an 86 Seeker repaint, and you would remove those animated traits that we all know and love Slipstream for, which is why I don't like these G1ified animated and prime redos the last few years. So it would just kind of go in line with those G1ified releases that I'm not too fond of. But again, I don't think it would be a terrible idea. It would certainly be better than the 2 Slipstreams we've gotten in Generations the last 10 years. But it still wouldn't be the most ideal thing. And I do agree with Evan kind of not really seemingly liking that idea, judging by the reaction that TFWiki community wrote here in this bullet point. But again, I don't want to say it was a totally bad idea that TFWiki community gave here. It wouldn't be a bad release, but I just think the most preferred ideal release from Transformers fans, animated fans, and Slipstream fans, which is like a majority of the fandom if we're being honest, we would all just really like to see a more faithful animated Slipstream at this point after the 2 releases that we've gotten the last 10 years not being the greatest, And the last bullet point that I want to cover here is he's definitely wanting to do more War for Cybertron / SS86 compatible cassettes. They're very popular. Evan was surprised Nate had mentioned the original concept art Scorpion tape patent for the 86 product assortment as being on Evan's shortlist. They're really reaching into some deep cuts, aren't they? They are really tapping into that concept art scene, that niche Transformers lore and history, whether it's from the live action stuff, video games, cartoons, G1, you name it, they're looking at it. The last few years when they say in interviews and Instagram DMs that everything is on the table, they really mean everything is on the table. Well, I mean, except for it seems like Beast Machines and Energon, but I digress. I'll do a video on that in like a few days here on the channel because there's some updates on that from this interview. But this whole thing here about doing the Scorpion tape from the 86 movie, I think that would be really crazy. And they talked about some other concept art things I'm going to get into in future videos in this interview that would be even crazier, honestly. And I think they're really going to start delving into some interesting stuff in the coming years for that concept art subline and studio series. And they're not going to waste that cassette mold that they just spent extra money on to release with that new Soundwave coming out in a few months. They're going to try and get their money's worth internally with that new cassette mold. The Japanese repaints, other G1 characters from the US side that we haven't gotten yet on that new cassette mold. And obviously, talking about the Scorpion tape, stuff like this, the really D-list concept art stuff with the cassettes, I'm sure they're going to delve into at some point soon. Me personally, I don't really care about picking this up. I mean, it'd be cool to see, getting that released 40-something years later. That would be a pretty big feat for Transformers fans, especially, hardcore G1 fans that know all the lore and everything like that. But for me personally, I don't like the new cassette mold that much. I still think they have a long ways to go. I think it's an improvement over the Siege and Earthrise cassettes, but as a whole, they still have quite a ways to go in terms of making a really nice, palatable looking cassette tape for, G1 Soundwave and Blaster. And the Scorpion cassette, I just don't really care about. I didn't even really know about this until I read the interview a couple days ago. I think I heard about it a few years back, but then I kind of looked it up and then forgot about it. you know how stuff like that goes at times in your life. But yeah, I just don't really care about this. It would be cool to see as a Transformers fan who likes deep cut lore and concept art and characters getting made that were canceled in the past. Like we got that Toxitron a couple years ago and a bunch of other stuff that we got over the last few years and generations that's been canceled in the 2000s and the 90s and the 80s. But for me personally, I just don't really care about the character. But yeah, guys, let me know down below, how do y'all feel about the information in these bullet points that I covered here. And yeah, guys, thank you for watching this video. Catch y'all in the next one. Bye.